On Sunday in Baku, as the race unfolded, it looked like Leclerc, who had started only 8th on the grid due to a crash in qualifying, was potentially on a strategy that would allow him to compete with the leaders. But as time went on, it looked increasingly like Ferrari was leaving Leclerc out to dry, allowing him to lose bundles of time, eventually ending up lonely and helpless in 5th place. Did Ferrari bungle their strategy, as it seemed to many fans watching live? Or did circumstances put them in the unenviable damned if you do, damned if you don't roll of the dice? Let's have a little look at what happened. Charles Leclerc, through practice and early qualifying, looked to be the guy to beat in Azerbaijan. Yes, Mercedes found those extra tenths on Saturday and Sunday, as they are wont to do, but Leclerc really did look like he had serious pace and confidence every time he hit the track. Unfortunately, he crashed in qualifying too, and that very much put an end to placing himself well on the grid for the start. And that's really the first thing we need to bear in mind. He did make an error all on his own and hit the wall. After this, Ferrari and Leclerc had one hand tied behind their back when putting a race plan together. Charles isn't stupid, as he woefully exclaimed himself, but the error kept him away from the front of the grid and denied him and his teammate the opportunity to tow each other with slipstreams, as Mercedes were able to do in Q3. So that was the beginning of their problems. Now in Baku, the race starts at 10 past 4. That's a bit later than the standard 2 PM local race start time, but it was a hotter day than it had been earlier in the weekend. This meant the track would start out pretty hot, but as the sun dipped below the buildings courting the track, the long shadows would bring temperatures down over the course of the race. So the soft tyres that almost everyone started the race on were much more vulnerable through the first stint, with the extra heat and heavy fuel loads causing them to degrade out of their prime pretty quickly. With the Mercedes pushing each other forward and Vettel damaging his tyres after struggling with the temperature, Leclerc was having a great time on the mediums, pushing forward through the field on better pace than anyone. In fact, Leclerc caught right up to the back of Vettel by lap 11 when Ferrari wisely pitted the German driver and got him out of the way. This caused a cascade of reactionary stops which left Leclerc with a 14-second lead over Bottas by lap 15, though he did have a stop yet to make of his own. He looked to be in prime position to make the alternative strategy work and claw back a lot of points from his upset in qualifying. But, as we saw, Ferrari left him out for so long on those ageing medium tyres that he was swallowed up by Bottas, Hamilton and Vettel, all on their fresher tyres, over the course of his stint before pitting and coming out behind Verstappen where he was too far behind to really do anything. So what happened, and what were Ferrari's options really? Well, Leclerc had to start on the medium tyres, as that's what he set his fastest lap on in Q2 before throwing it into the wall. That lap was good enough to get him into Q3, so technically he was part of the top 10 shootout despite wrecking his car. This meant he was locked into that medium tyre. In fact, had he not crashed and delayed the end of Q2 so much, Vettel may well have started on the medium tyres with him. When Leclerc took the lead, he was 14 seconds ahead of Bottas and in prime safety car territory. A safety car in Baku roughly halves the time you'd lose coming into the pits. Under normal race running, a pit stop costs about 20 seconds, but under a safety car or virtual safety car, you can get in and out of the pits, losing only 10 seconds to the other cars, give or take. If a safety car had appeared in the first 5 laps of Leclerc's lead, he could well have popped in and out of the pits and potentially kept track position at the front. And this is Baku we're talking about. We're used to people making mistakes on a track that's both super fast but full of tight twists between barriers and loaded with unforgiving braking zones. Hell, the Formula 2 race earlier that day was practically more safety car than actual green flag racing, with the amount of accident and incident throughout the session. So betting on some kind of suspended race laps, be it through virtual or full safety car, isn't a crazy wager by any stretch. If the safety car had come, Leclerc would still be in a tricky position, don't get me wrong. Being already on the mediums, he couldn't just strap on another set of those mediums and run to the end and align himself with everyone else. He could pop onto the white-walled hard tyres and run to the end, trying desperately to defend on a much weaker tyre for half the race. Now this would be a huge risk, as the mediums were looking good, even if drivers were having to manage them astutely to keep them alive and pacey till the end. Alternatively, he could have strapped on a pair of softs and tried to pull as much of a gap as possible to the Mercedes cars in the next 10 to 12 laps before getting back on a fresh set of mediums for the final aggressive stint. This could have paid dividends, as he'd been on the faster, racier tyre for the rest of the race, and his competitors would struggle to fight back. They certainly wouldn't have been able to match his pace at almost any of the remaining laps. As the track cooled, the softs would be punchier and more stable through his run than they had been for his rivals earlier in the race. I mean, it'd still be a big risk, but they could have had a lot of fun trying it. Another safety car later in the race, again, not a crazy bet, could have given them a second cheap pit stop window. There was potential. So that's why Ferrari clung on in there, keeping Charles out even as the gap between him and the cars behind closed up. There was still opportunity to make hay. Unfortunately, after a while, Leclerc entered a kind of strategic no man's land. Pit early enough and you can attempt the medium soft medium two-stop, but you do really want to hold out for a safety car window to make the best of it. But after a while, the two-stop becomes too slow. You lose too much time taking pit stops at 20 seconds a pop without enough time in hot stints to make the time back again. So Leclerc ends up stuck on aging medium tyres, helpless to the people behind on fresh rubber, waiting until he's late enough in the race to safely switch over to the softs. They decided to wait until lap 34, 16 laps from the end, to bring him in for those softs. So yeah, Leclerc was kind of left helpless out there. Now, if Ferrari had known for certain that no safety car would come, at least not at a convenient time, they could have committed earlier to a two-stop strategy and got aggressive to see what might have come of it. Third or fourth position? It's very possible. Higher? It really depends on how much Leclerc could bring to the table, if his Friday and Saturday running would translate to the race. It looked very likely. Ferrari did the best they could with the information they had and without a safety car to bail them out. But they were always going to be on the back foot once Charles crashed out in Q2 having locked in those medium tyres. The results so far don't necessarily speak to the established order. Ferrari could have got a front row start and a 1-2 in Baku without Leclerc's crash. As we head to the middle stretch of the season, we shall see if Ferrari can capitalise on the strong package they genuinely have available, or whether they will continue to wither in the shadow of Mercedes' incredibly strong ability to extract the maximum out of every weekend.